So we have plenty of time for questions. If people have questions, could you stand up and just say your name and your affiliation, and then who you'd like to answer your question?
Hi, my name is Craig. I'm with the Safe Horizon Street Work Project. And I'm just curious, we work with homeless youth, and I'm actually curious, some of our youth may fit into some of the stuff in this population, but is oftentimes missed by DHS contracted outreach. I'm just curious, age demographically, were young adults involved in any of the folks in the study at all?
They weren't necessarily not considered. We look at individuals 18 above is ours. However, we weren't necessarily targeting the young adult population. I can't necessarily speak for how it works at Bellevue, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised, as in many cases with young adults, they're kind of like missed. We find that very often just with our regular outreach services. As we're out in the field, at times they're often more difficult to identify because they might just appear like an individual hanging out there in the corner, or they may be actively trying to hide themselves for a variety of reasons if they're trying to escape from a bad situation or a particularly bad person. But as far as the development of this pilot, we looked at age as long as it was 18 or above.
And were any of the people in it?
No. No, I'm pretty sure our youngest individual is probably 26. Oh,
Yeah, so there was one young adult that we were going to include, but he went to jail and is incarcerated for a long period of time. But I think we don't have many young adults, and I think one reason for that is that we're targeting chronic users. So they're sort of more far along in their addiction. Not to say that young adults can't have that severe of an addiction problem, but that's also one of the things that Dr. McCormick is working on, is trying to create an algorithm to find these patients before they get to the point where they're at right now. So to find them at a younger age and engage them in these services more as a preventative measure as well.
The age range for the 51 patients who had 10 more visits was 20 to 70. It is now 20 to 70. It was a few years ago. And the average was 4 to 7. So just a good idea. It was pretty tightly around that 4 to 7.
I'm Brian. I'm with Common Ground. I just wanted to ask, if you guys are planning on continuing the study and continuing the placements, and also if you had any insight on tenants who are already placed, clients who are placed, and minimizing recidivism, folks who have been placed but still spend a lot of time.
Sam from DHS, and we have continued this pilot. We've started at different hospitals, at Beth Israel and at a hospital in Brooklyn, and it's been curious to us to see it at other hospitals, to see what are the differences between Bellevue as a unique institution, it's a super hospital, versus smaller hospitals. And also, too, just anecdotally, we've noticed that the frequent users, we go just to the top 10 at Beth Israel, there was tremendous, like almost 100% overlap between Bellevue and Beth Israel. And so this really did excite me a lot more, because it's one thing to think that there's 50 of these chronic ED users at every hospital, but it's another thing to say, hey, there's 20 that are at Bellevue. Right next to Bellevue is NYU. There's Columbia just up the way. There's Beth Israel down the way. If it's the same group that are this super high users, these hundreds of visits, then we're really making a huge impact by clearing that out of getting them to where the services they really need. Sometimes it's longer medical, sometimes it's housing. And then there's that opportunity cost. Okay, so now the doctors are more freed up. So an emergency, another kind of emergency, a gunshot or other kinds of things come into the ED. They're not tied down by these clients that would be better served in other settings. So, that's good motivation for us, and it's kept us involved. So ongoing, each client, it's such a small group. so it's hard for me to generalize about it. I know that we've made some attempts to generalize about them, but we've had clients that got completely sober. We've had clients that got completely sober and then relapsed after months. And some of them are very much in fitting with our general demographic of chronic street homeless clients. So we've partnered a little bit with the new health home models that's rolling out, and they've taken on these clients onto their caseload that will continue to work with them through their housing. So there's that. It's very fresh, it's very small, so that's the direction we're trying to go to for ongoing care.
Back there.
Wendell McPherson's Marriage Village Veterans and Family Services. How are you all helping our vets? What are you all doing for our vets? I mean, they have the same problems. Are they included in these stats, these figures, or they're just, not included?
That's a great question. It kind of gives me an opportunity to brag a little bit about the consortium. So actually, the team that handles a bulk of the CPI pilot, they're known as the Special Initiative Team. Actually, the director's sitting right there. As another one of our initiatives, we also received funding for a veteran initiative in order to take advantage of the veteran housing out there, as well as getting more veterans onto our caseload. We found that for the most part, we were only, if we looked at those individuals staying on the streets, it was about around 10% of our caseload on the street were vets. And that sort of flew in the face of, nationally, the word was kind of out there that 20% was more accurate. So we ramped up our efforts a little bit, scoured the streets more. We're still coming up to that 10%. It allowed us to see, we're missing some of these vets. Maybe they're not staying on the streets. Where else are they staying? With this veteran initiative money that came into place, we expanded our team so that they could specialize just in vets and began connecting with some of the veteran services out there, and which allowed us to get referrals from these programs, where the programs could then be the ones saying, yes, this person's street homeless, they report it, perhaps they're just staying in areas that are hard to see, or they're spending time indoors, but if they're not indoors in these programs, then they are street homeless. And we're connecting us with these vets. That actually created an increase of about 6% in our overall caseload, all of them being vets. So we continue to look in different ways in order to identify our vets and utilize the services that are out there. This VA Medical Center as well has been a huge referral source. However, with this particular pilot, we weren't necessarily targeting vets, but a few of how many of the CPI guys were vets? And 3 of the individuals in CPI actually turned out to be vets, which actually was beneficial for us because 2 of them were connected with vet housing.
Are you actually going to the VA hospital, or are you just staying exclusively to Beth Israel and to all the other hospitals where my vets don't go? They go to the VA hospital. Are you guys reaching out to the VA hospital?
Yeah, we're actually connected to the VA hospital. Our liaison, as part of the special initiative team, has regular contact with somebody at the VA, and we do receive referrals from them.
In all the boroughs?
We connect more so with the Manhattan, but we're also connected with the vet hospital in the Bronx. Yeah.
Well, I've got 287 vets that are homeless. So if you guys want to come over and help them out, I would greatly appreciate any assistance.
Yeah, it might be good actually to connect outside, because I'm talking a lot about Manhattan, but the truth of the matter is there's actually a team in each one of the boroughs, and many of those teams also receive special some of the special funds from Robin Hood for services solely for veterans. So there's also a team in Brooklyn, Queens that's working similar to the way we are. I wonder if afterwards, if you want to come see me, we can kind of talk about that, because a lot of the work that we're doing with veterans is also being done in other boroughs just by other teams. We're supposed to be specializing in Manhattan, but we have good relationships with some of the vet services in the Bronx, and for that reason we also expanded up there.
Well, my 287 are right around the corner of 43rd Street, so we can talk.
Yeah.
Yes, question there.
Hi, I'm Megan Fogarty from Bronx Works. I was just curious, was it 5 people that were placed into permanent housing? I was just curious, did they end up in supportive housing? Were they in category A, category E? What was sort of that breakdown?
So 7 individuals were placed into permanent housing. I'm sorry, I don't actually have the breakdown. I can speak to maybe just a few of them, but for the most part, all of them went into supportive housing. I don't know, and I'd say largely most of them were Cat A, but I don't think it was all 7. I think one of those may have been like a permanent placement in a nursing home as well.
Yeah, question over there and then one.
Cynthia Stewart from the Supportive Housing Network. How have you seen, Ryan and Lily, what's happened in terms of Bellevue's receptivity since you started and now?
Do you want to speak to this? Okay. I mean, like I said, it's been a challenge. So we're still building. Bellevue's huge, and Ryan is still presenting this pilot in different departments and trying to create buy-in. So it was a process both, again, like I said, at the provider level, sort of challenging the perception of these patients and challenging the idea that when a patient leaves against medical advice, it's because they don't want care or because for whatever slew of reasons, and that it may actually be related to the severity of their alcoholism, how that's manifested in their brain and their decision-making capacity, and a whole slew of other reasons. Do they need to get to a soup kitchen that serves food at a certain time? Do they need to get to a shelter that has a curfew? There's just so many different factors that play into these patients. So complicating the image of these patients for providers, I think, is one element. And then the second element is institutional buy-in. So supporting this initiative and realizing, Bellevue is obviously interested now. They see that 16 patients cost $1.1 million in 6 months. But it's been a process, and it's taken a lot of work. Ryan can supplement this.
I might add to that. That it's been a very big challenge. When the first patient that you talked about that brought everybody together died, we had I basically just called a meeting with some other people, and the response was phenomenal. We had representatives from emergency medicine, psychiatry, toxicology, neurology, care management, social work, Manhattan Outreach, DHS, Common Ground. There were a number of people, FDNY. And so part of this has been keeping engaged the other departments within the NYU School of Medicine and Bellevue Hospital, and has involved, in addition to HIPAA and other privacy laws, institutions have their own policies that are a little more strict, so we've had to be involved with administration and compliance. But one of the things that Lily was speaking about is the change in perception of this patient population. So one, it's clear that they cost a lot of money and that they're dying and have a tremendous morbidity. So there is that aspect of it. We started this while Bellevue and HHC were in the middle of and continue to be in a period of budget cuts. And so trying to ask for more services in a time when everything's on a hiring freeze and people are being laid off is difficult. So that did take some time to try to to get their support. And like Lily said, part of this started off with the two of us. We did a huge database search, reviewed hundreds of charts, and essentially started a lot of this from a very ground level, and has involved regularly having meetings where I'll meet with, I've done a few presentations with psychiatry, social work, internal medicine, internal medicine, my first one is next week, but just trying to get them engaged and also see this population differently. Much has been said about how we perceive them, period. And the term CPI and drunks or frequent flyers, and we're trying to learn a lot more about them and educate our coworkers about the fact that the status quo may not be we may be able to do better, and I believe that we can do better, and that I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction with seeing the same people over and over, seeing them die, and maybe giving them a meal before they either walk out or we kick them out. And so there has been some buy-in from the ground level, seeing some of these patients get better. And unfortunately, when somebody gets better and they don't show up, you're not reminded of that as much as you are when they continue to show up. And so it's easier to demonstrate the failures than the successes. But part of what I'm doing is going around and trying to demonstrate the successes. And Joe was talking about the introduction of care managers, and we didn't have that for the first year. And more recently, as the hospital to home CIDP project is coming to an end, they have brought in the care managers that were working with that population to help with our population. And we're trying to integrate this into the health home model, but one thing that's a little bit disheartening is that on a preliminary list, I think none of our patients were on the health homes list. And in my meeting yesterday, Bellevue was like, I don't know once the health home gets operational if we'll be able to continue to provide these care management supports. So we need to figure out how we're going to tackle that. And some of that is always just talk, and I probably shouldn't have said that out loud. But so how are we going to come to? So yesterday we had a meeting about how we're going to come to a solution, because we know that is a key element. And how do we sustain that? Do we need to look for funding? And part of it is I haven't done, even though I've been trying to convince medicine and psychiatry and emergency medicine about the need for this and the benefit, I haven't shown these results to HHC administration yet. And so, I think coming out of that meeting, even though I just said something that sounds not hopeful, there is hope, and some of the benefits of having their adding the resources that were part of hospital home is that they are more familiar with running a larger scale, not ground up project that has introduced some organization that didn't exist before, and some ideas and the way that this could be run better.
I think that there's a lot more buy-in that we need institutionally in the city of New York. I mean, we know that the FDNY, which oversees EMS, has a good database, and they know where they're delivering different clients to emergency rooms, and it would be great to be able to partner deeper with them. We know that HHC is not able right now to collect consistent data at each of their emergency rooms as to who's going there, and share medical records across places. Why should it matter if a client goes to one hospital or another? They need care. Some of them are in end-stage cancers or other things that would really complicate treatment, and treatment can be detrimental if they don't have that information. So some of these walls we've built up as institutions to ostensibly protect client autonomy or decision-making or anonymity ends up being really self-serving towards the institutions that we serve, and this is DHS as well, and is really liability driven, not client interest driven. And that, when we start to look at these complicated cases, they do highlight a lot of work that can still be done. And I think that's the thing that we're kind of getting at. We see great results, but we see a lot of the limitations that we've had in just with this small group.
We have time for one more question. Yeah.
I work with BRC, and we work with some of similar folks once they're in permanent supportive housing. But we have kind of a similar problem where we'll notice some of our folks that are category E or category A type of clients that will go into the emergency room and then they'll leave against medical advice. So some of the stuff you guys were talking about, I just wondered, in the successes that you had, was there any common trend there that about something that happened or a specific event or specific service that the client received that we could work with our case managers to see if they can ensure that that's happening? Because what we see is, these people, they come to us, they get in, and then if they're kind of a chronic user and they end up back in the ER and then they leave mixed medical advice, and then it's hard for us to even find them again. So, any suggestions as to any successes you've had?
Yes, definitely. I think there could be a myriad of things, but one in particular, I think it's just the number of engagements that occurred at the hospital. Like, for a lot of these individuals that we placed, it took multiple engagements there, and I feel like that setting probably worked in our favor. Like, the person has to be aware, like, wow, I ended up in the hospital and this guy's talking to me about housing. Maybe I should listen, as opposed to on the street, they might not have that dynamic there. But that, for each individual, there might have been something a little bit different, but that seemed to be pretty consistent with a large group of these individuals. It was just multiple engagements in a short period of time at the ED. So I'd say as much as BRC is perhaps able to connect with hospital and work with them in order to engage the clients when they arrive at the hospital, I think that you might be able to duplicate some of the success.
Critical time intervention, the message and the timing is important.
Yeah.
And I would also just say we've been working on a qualitative study for part of this, which is interviews with these patients, and that's one of the questions we ask. We're about halfway through. Why do you choose to leave AMA? And a response that we've been getting a lot is that they don't feel like they're respected and treated well at the hospital. So I think that's one element to it, and then also just the alcoholism and the implications of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.